Are we live? Are we live, guys? Who can hear us? Say hi, I'm Ree from mummyoffour.com. Welcome to this live stream and welcome to my very special guest, my fellow vlogger, we don't know what to call ourselves, friend, Vicky Smith from the Mummy Bubble, and you will know her possibly as by Vicky Smith over on Instagram, who is something of a guru when it comes to all of the news and current affairs and things, and just cutting through the BS. I know I really relied on her, especially when the pandemic was at its worst I've just confused myself because I've now got myself talking in my ear and there's a lag, so that's really confused me. Anyway, so we've got Vicky, and Vicky, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do while I attempt to change my headphones over to my computer from my phone.
Oh God, technical issues. So as you just said, it's so hard to know what to call yourself when you do what we do. So I often just fall back on, like, I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, I'm a writer, and kind of leave it at that. But this is so nice to be chatting to you, because obviously we've been sort of talking online for years. This is our first face-to-face chat, isn't it? So it's kind of nice to finally have a chance to sort of speak face-to-face.
Right, hang on. Sorry, Vicky. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Right, there we go. Perfect. I've now sorted out the lag issue. Apologies, guys. Technical issues. I could hear what Vicky was saying about a minute ago. But you're now actually in my ears. These are the realities of lives, guys. So this is why you just got to kind of bear with us. So sorry, what did you say? It was the very last thing you said for me before my headphones kicked in.
I was literally just saying it's really nice to be able to have a chat with you face to face.
Definitely.
Having been like speaking to each other online for years.
Yeah, years and years. And really,
this is really cool.
It is really cool because I don't know about you, Vicky, but I don't really know any people in real life that do what I do. And I always say, hey, people like ask in real life what you do for a living. And I'm like, well, blogger sounds, I don't know, like some sort of hobby. And then YouTuber sounds maybe like I'm making Minecraft videos and maybe I'm 12. And, you know, it's all about influencers, just too cringy. There's no word. We need to make up a good word. Anyway, tell the good people of YouTube what you've been doing, why you've gained so much and quite a lot of, you know, quite high profile attention during the course of this darling pandemic.
Right, darling, can you go? Sorry, bear with me while
I love it, guys. Live. This is what we have when we're live. We have children coming in. It's like that guy who was on the news and the baby walker.
Okay, so yeah, anyway, I knew that was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen within 3 minutes of us. But there you go, it's happened. So, anyway, so what was the question?
Right. So just tell people sort of, just in brief, what you've been doing and why, you know, about your, because you were a journalist, weren't you?
Yeah, that's it. Right. So I worked as a journalist for about 15 years. So I was working, first of all, in local papers as a reporter and then later as a news editor. And then I started working for national press. So I worked for the Daily Mirror for a few years. And that was like really exciting job. You know, everything was different. There was a bit of foreign travel as well. I did a little bit of royal coverage. I did some maternity cover for the Royal Reporter, so I got to do lots of like exciting jobs with the royal family, and I covered the birth of Prince George. And so that was all like really exciting. It was like amazing, like such a good time. And also some serious stuff, like I did a lot of court reporting and inquests and all sorts of things. So I left that job a few years ago just so that I could spend more time with my young family, because it is quite a intense sort of work environment, and it's very unpredictable in terms of hours and stuff. So it works much better for me to be able to work for myself and set my own hours, and then I can fit things around the children. So, but then the sort of when the pandemic came along, I had been talking newsy stuff on Instagram before, but I kind of I started talking about it a lot more as the pandemic hit, because I just found that there was a bit of a disconnect between the information we were being given by scientists and sometimes the way that was being translated into headlines and stuff. And I know like a lot of people were having a lot of anxiety and they were really worried. And I was sort of seeing people, you know, sort of misinterpreting things because they'd seen a headline and they were like, oh my God, should I be really scared? So I kind of started on stories to just share stuff, headlines, stories, and say, look, this is what this says, but bear in mind all of this stuff. And just trying to show people how to deal with headlines that look scary, but actually, you know, scratch beneath the surface, put it into context, and just take a deep breath and breathe. You know, the world is not ending type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, for one, found that so helpful. Like, I cannot tell you how helpful I found that, because especially watching the news and watching it, if you're just watching a news broadcast and have it kind of streamed at you, and then you've got kind of pictures of crying, grieving relatives and things, it was just all too much. And I went from watching all of the updates live and things to I just can't do this anymore. And it was and I, not what I'd considered to normally be a very anxious person, but I think so many people, and me included, were just like totally overwhelmed by it. And the way you were breaking it down was just amazing. So thank you on behalf of the good people of the internet for that.
That's so good to hear that. And, you know, it kind of gave me a bit of purpose, particularly at times when, you know, maybe you were a bit overwhelmed by homeschooling and stuff. It gave me a little bit of purpose to feel like, okay, well, you know, we're all stuck at home. This kind of sucks. But, you know, there's this little thing I can do. And I was getting great feedback on what I was doing and trying to signpost people to, you know, the best places for information and summarizing the daily briefings. And it just, like, I had so much positive feedback that I was like, well, you know, I'll keep doing this. And now, I sort of spend a good chunk of time every day trying to just sift through. I don't think I should be your only news source at all, because I just don't have time to cover every single bit of news. That would, like, you know, be crazy. But I suppose just what I try to do is focus on maybe like big picture stuff that's happening, and particularly with the pandemic, and just really talk about, well, what does this really mean? And, you know, who should we be listening to on this particular topic? And here are some great things that you can read about this so that you can understand it better. And, you know, I'm just taking it from like a very like journalist perspective of, you know, understanding like how the media works.
Which is emotive stuff. That's a lot of the stuff that I feel like you pointed out that I've noticed through like watching your content, is you've watched a lot of, well, actually this word is suggesting this, but when you look at it, it's only like asking the question. And so that's really, really helped. So one of the first questions, you know, that was asked in lots of different ways, but the general gist of it is, if we're not just watching your stories, which at one stage I must admit was the only source of news I could face taking in, but when we're sort of becoming a little calmer, which sources should we be relying on, and which ones should we be going, no, this is nonsense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really good question. I get asked this one quite a lot as well. So for me, wherever you see a claim being made, whether that's on Facebook or from a friend or just on a headline in a tweet, whatever, it's really important to get to grips with, okay, well, who's saying this? Who is it that said this? What are their qualifications? Are they credible? Like, has anything that they've done in the past like been discredited? So, for example, you know, recently in the news we've had this former nurse, Kate Shemirani, who has been talking at a lot of anti-vaccine rallies and anti-lockdown rallies. You know, she's no longer a practicing nurse. She's been struck off from practicing as a nurse because she was providing misinformation to people in her job. So, you know, immediately that should send a red flag to basically literally anything that this woman has to say, that it is pretty dangerous stuff. And then you should also consider, well, what evidence have they got to back up what they're saying? And how credible is the evidence that this source is using? And what are other experts saying about that? So what is the consensus view? Because I've just mentioned Kate Shemirani there, but often we do get people who seemingly have great credentials. They're a doctor, they're more qualified than me, probably did much better at science GCSE than I did, but they're making claims that are kind of like, oh, whoa, like, should I be worried about that? And so I always come back to, well, look, what is the consensus view of the vast majority of experts in this area? And that sort of always guides me through. I think just sources need to be able to provide a solid argument based on sound and reliable information. And I think, social media is probably, I would say it's the biggest source of misinformation. But at the same time, I've found some amazing scientists and journalists on Twitter during the pandemic that have been so great at providing these like threads or summarizing new studies that are out. So I don't want to write off social media because I think it has its place. And obviously I'm on social media giving out information. So
don't listen to social media, but I'm on it. I end up with, and I think you often do mention the irony there, don't you?
Yeah, and it is ironic. I'm like, I'm not saying don't listen to anything you see on social media, but a lot of the misinformation that we're getting is the sources from there. And actually, I think there was a really interesting study the other week from a group of people that are sort of studying disinformation on the internet, and they found like the source for most of the disinformation about the pandemic and COVID vaccines and stuff is coming from only like 12 people or something who are using social media. 12 people are like the sources responsible for a lot of that disinformation. I was like, wow, like it just shows you like the impact that one bit of disinformation can have, because I think we all know the big falsehoods around there. Like we've probably all heard them at some point. It's been shared with us via WhatsApp, or we've come across it on Facebook because someone's posted it. So I think, it can be overwhelming because we're living in a digital age where literally your phone's in your hand. We've got 24-hour news. You've got information coming at you all the time. But it's often worth just like deep breath, going through those points that I've said, and really just try and critically assess the information that you're being shown. And I have yet to come across a piece of disinformation online that hasn't been like thoroughly debunked. So we've got some like amazing fact checkers going through the stuff that we find online. So it's always quite easy to find, well, actually, no, like this isn't the case, and this is why it isn't the case. So there is good stuff out there, but I think you need to come at it with your critical sort of hat on, able to really weigh up, well, how reliable is this? What is the solid evidence that this source is presenting?
Yeah, that sounds very, very sensible. Hopefully we can all think of that next time we see something really panicky. So the next one could be a really long question, so I'm just going to ask you to just summarize it. When are the rules changing? If we can just, the next updates.
The next thing. So, I mean, this is a tricky one because obviously I'm in England where like we reached stage 4. Obviously, you're in Wales where you're
I know there's something on the 7th. Something on the 7th?
Yeah. And then Scotland is a little bit further behind that and is lifting most restrictions on August the 9th, I think.
Right.
And then Northern Ireland, I think, is different to that as well. So, as we're moving in slightly different, not different directions. We're all going in the same direction, but we're using a different time frame, and we things have differed throughout the pandemic, so that can make it quite confusing. But the best place to find out when your rules are changing specifically for where you live, just like go on the Gov website and just see like where are we and when is the next lot of rules lifting, etc. In terms of what we have now in England, where like we've lifted mask mandates and there's really very few rules that you're having to follow. I suppose like the big ones being isolate and adhering to track and trace. It tells you isolate, like you need to do it. I don't see that changing this year. I think isolate is just like your basic tool against the virus spreading. It's your like absolute basic thing to try and control the spread.
Can I just ask this one now? As I understand it, is this right? In Wales, if we are double vaxxed, You
Yes.
don't have to isolate if you've been in contact with someone from the 7th. Is that right? Is that the same in England? Is that coming
That's
in?
right. In England, that's coming in on August the 16th.
Right, okay. So that will be massive for us, obviously, because I have all these children. So the chances of one of us, or myself or my husband, being in contact with someone, and it was, I don't know if you've had to have any children isolate, but it was a nightmare when William had to isolate, especially because I wasn't allowed to take him out of the house, so I couldn't go and fetch the others from school. And so that's going to be a massive...
Yes.
That's going to be brilliant for us.
That's it. That will help a lot. I mean, I think we've all read a lot about the pingdemic. I really hate that word. It annoys me because like we have a pandemic, and that's why we have a pingdemic. And talking about it as just a pingdemic ignores the fact that it hasn't got a pandemic. Anyway, I think that will help a lot of people, and I think it also, recognises the fact that the vaccines we have are very, very good. If you do have symptoms, you should still self-isolate. That won't change. It's only if you come into contact with people. Obviously that's going to help with a lot of the disruption that we're seeing from it. But in terms of like isolation going altogether, that isn't going to happen this year, I don't think.
Right.
And actually I think culturally we're going to see a shift to, or before pandemic, if you were ill, you sort of soldiered on.
Yes.
And, even if you were full of snot and you felt sick, you'd be like, no.
Send them into school. If they get sent home, it's not my fault. It's their lack of being in school. They got sent home.
Exactly. And I think we're going to see a bit of a shift now where people, when they feel sick, they're actually going to be like, I'm infectious. I should stay home.
It's quite sensible, really, isn't it?
Exactly. We already saw last year that there was hardly any flu circulating over winter, and that it was we were all staying at home for a start, but also when we were sick we weren't going out and sneezing in the middle of the office.
Yes. I remember someone sort of a few months into the pandemic said that they watched one of my IKEA shop with me in haul videos, and they said all they could see, and I filmed it in something like February before we knew all this was coming. And they said, all those people coughing behind you, ew. Which brings me to another question. I'm not sure if I sent you some of the questions I had. I'm not sure if I sent you this one, so apologies. Do you think that there's a lot of people saying they had symptoms, and my children had the most horrendous cough and flu-y things, and half the children were off in the school concert before Christmas 2019? Could that have been something COVID-y? Is it possible?
Off the top of my head, I can't recall when the first current confirmed UK COVID case was, but I don't think it was as far back as December 2019.
Because we had something dreadful that went on and on for months.
Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean it wasn't here in December 2019. I think we're fairly certain it was here by January 2020. I think you've got to remember that in winter there are a ton of bugs going around anyway, and so all of us, we've all done it. After COVID landed, we're like, did I have COVID? Like, I felt ill, I felt really tired, and I had a cough, and I felt rough. But all the usual bugs are still here, so obviously that does, and some of them have a lot of overlapping symptoms with COVID, so that does make it really tricky. I would say I'm sure this question will be being studied a lot, and finally, if we're ever able to sort of exactly trace exactly who maybe patient 1 was in the UK and exactly when that was,
might be one of my children.
At the moment, I mean the guessing game of did I have COVID?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
who knows? Big question on everyone's lips, and I mean especially mine, as I officially resigned of my role as teacher. Will they shut the schools again? Please say no. Please say no. The answer, if it's not no, I don't want to hear it.
I really hope not. I really, really hope not. So
I can't. I just
it's
can't
really
again.
quite unlikely. The reason I think it's really unlikely is that we have got these vaccines and they work so amazingly well. Obviously, we're not vaccinating the children yet, only those very vulnerable children who are over 12, or kids who live with a clinically vulnerable person in their home that are over 12. But we've got these very, very effective vaccines, and that is making a huge difference already. We can see that in the data that it's making a huge difference. And the government has always said, and I think no one sort of disagrees with this approach, that schools should be the last things to close and the first things to reopen, because education is so important. And it's not just important for us as parents and our sanity, it's important for the kids' health and general well-being. If they are used to being in school, because obviously some people do normally homeschool their children, but if a child normally goes to school, it is the best thing for them to carry on their normal schooling. So I would say for where we are right now, schools are going to be back with a bang for the new term in the new year. Predicting what COVID is going to do over the winter is quite difficult, and I don't think I've seen anyone saying anything beyond over winter we will see another wave of COVID. And also we've got all of the other bugs that are going to come back as well, so flu, RSV in children, which may put a bit of pressure on the NHS. But I personally, looking at it now, I can't see the schools closing again.
I hope that's right.
I don't think it's very likely.
I hope so. And they won't be shutting whole year groups, will they? Because of the under 18s in Wales are going to be exempt from the track and trace. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So what they've done is there's no more bubbles. So if you get a positive case in a class now, the whole class doesn't get sent home, which is great. There will still be track and trace, but as you said a little while ago, from whatever day in Wales and England from August 16th, under 18s aren't going to need to self-isolate if they've come into close contact with a positive case. They will be encouraged to get a test. So obviously if that test comes back positive, then they would be told not to go back into school. So I'm not saying there will be no disruption to your child's education, because if they test positive for COVID, then obviously they won't.
So track and trace will still have a place. I was thinking they're not going to have much to do if they're only talking to unvaccinated adults. They're going to have a very small, but I suppose they're still going to be speaking to, they'll still tell us, so they'll still get in touch, but the result, the outcome will be different. Right, okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
They will not require you to have a test, but they will strongly encourage you to get a PCR
to get tested.
And,
very sensible. We've got a lot of comments, and we've got some questions in the comments, some chit chat between Daddy of 4, who is jumping into the comments apparently from the next room. That's really helpful. And some people have said, have you come here to moderate? No, he didn't even know about that. He's literally just jumping in and talking about takeaways. Totally unhelpful. Thank you for that, darling. Right. Right, some actual on-topic questions. Do kids have to have the vaccine from Wendy?
No. So at the moment, children aren't being vaccinated unless they're over 12 and clinically vulnerable, and that is parental choice. A GP will contact if that child is eligible for the vaccine. And much like with adults, we're contacted and told, hey, you're eligible, and you either leg it down to the vaccine centre.
That was me. I was like...
or you exercise your right to choose and say, well, no, I've decided not to have it. And so, no, children, the vaccine will not be mandatory in kids. And as I said, at the moment, it's only for the clinically vulnerable kids. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I think I put out a story just before I started this live. Nicola Sturgeon has said that kids over 16, even healthy kids, are going to be offered the jab soon. She didn't put a date on it, but she said soon. Is quite interesting. A lot of experts have been calling for it, because we know that in the older age groups of children, that the virus does seem to spread, certainly in a similar way to what it does in adults. Once you get down to primary, it doesn't seem to spread as easily. It does spread.
Yeah. Well, when I had COVID before Christmas, I was very poorly. I have got a separate video about this if anyone wants to hear the whole story. But in summary, I was quite poorly, and then my husband got pinged, I think maybe just after I had my results, but he only had 3 days left to isolate, so he'd clearly be in contact with someone, previously. Zara, I was convinced we either both had COVID or we both didn't have COVID. So as far as I was concerned, we both had the same thing. I tested positive, which wasn't any surprise to me, but she tested negative. So I was just convinced I'd done the test wrong. So when Dylan said on Christmas Day, I've got a little bit of a headache and I'm a bit hot, I gave him 2 paracetamol and that was it. But I booked him for a test, I booked my husband for a test, and I booked either William or Bella for a test. I can't remember which one. I was like, can you smell this? No, right, fine, having a test. My husband and teenager were pretty much symptomless, other than that 20 minutes I was a bit hot. And they were both positive, and the little ones, including Zara, who I retested because I was convinced I'd done it wrong, was still negative, even though she was coughing, she had a temperature. So, that's very strange. It's so strange. So it is just such a weird thing, though, isn't it? So weird. But yes, obviously that, the teenagers do get it more than the children. And my children who were, in the house with me before I exhibited symptoms and before I knew what it was and whatever, didn't get it. Very, very strange. But it's interesting.
It's something that they're looking at, trying to understand why the age groups of kids seems a little bit different. But the data certainly shows us that when you get down to those younger age groups, they're not seeing as high a rate of incidence as the older teens.
And I just didn't believe that until it happened in our house. I just didn't believe it. I just didn't believe it until they just didn't get it. I was just like, wow. Clearly the science is right. So do you think then they're not vaccinating the children because they genuinely don't need it, or because like they're down the list and priorities and sort of being able to roll it out enough? Do you think if there was unlimited resources they'd vaccinate them, or they just wouldn't bother?
This is such a difficult question. It's such a big one because there are kind of 2 big issues around this. So there's the moral issue of vaccinating children who are at very, very low risk from COVID at a time when a large part of the world has very limited access to vaccines. So we're talking about health workers in developing nations and elderly people in developing nations who probably won't manage to get hold of a vaccine this year. So then to vaccinate kids here, is that ethically right to do so? And then you've also got, so vaccinating kids would clearly have a positive, implication for like the UK as a whole, because it brings us close to herd immunity. But how much benefit does it have for the individual child who is not at high risk from COVID? What the JCVI has been saying is that we have data about Pfizer and Moderna that shows there are very, very rare incidences of this heart inflammation in particularly younger adults. And what I think they're just waiting for is a little bit more safety data from places like the US and Canada, which are already using these vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, in over 12s. And I think Israel is as well. So I think they're just waiting. JCVI released a really, really long statement about their thinking about using vaccines in kids and how they reached their decision. And that is really, and that's really worth a read. And you can find that on the gov.uk website.
Okay, that's worth looking at.
If anyone does want to read that, you can just message me and I will happily send you the link. But that talks through the way that they've come to that decision. It is quite interesting. It's worth having a look.
Definitely. Right, thank you for that. Let's take one more question from the comments and then we'll get back to some that have been sent in from Instagram. Sifting through my husband chit-chatting. Have there been any advancements in drug therapy for people who have been hospitalised?
We've had quite a few. Do you know what? The UK has done some really, really great work on trialing different therapies for COVID and dexamethasone. I'm trying to think if we've had like a really recent breakthrough, but I know that they're trialing different treatments. Like they trialed, for example, like blood plasma from recovered patients, if that could help people with COVID to recover. And I think they found actually it didn't work. But what's useful is they're going through these potential treatments and they're finding things now. The way they treat patients now for COVID in this wave is so different from the first wave because, doctors didn't have a best practice guide. This was a brand new virus. So, sort of the first last year. obviously doctors, doing their best. They knew, well, this is the symptoms and this is how we treat it. But now they know so much more about the virus and what therapies are really effective to helping patients recover. That is great. And as I say, the UK is really, really at the front of kind of trialing these new things.
That's good.
I think we'll see some great new therapies coming up, and I know they're trialing all sorts, so it'll be interesting to see.
Well, that's good to know. Next question came in since I sent you over the question, so springing this one on you. Have you watched any TV dramas at all that have been filmed since COVID about COVID? And would you say they've done all right with being accurate, or it's been a bit out there? Because I've watched Grey's Anatomy, Station 19, and they've been quite... and what's the other one? 911, 9-1-1, and they've all been quite masked up COVID-y.
Yeah. So I watched Grey's Anatomy as well, the most recent season.
It was a bit...
So much. It was kind of a tough watch, wasn't it? Because we were like kind of living it, reflecting life a bit too much. I'm sure if you're a healthcare worker, it was probably even harder to watch. But yeah, I thought it was like pretty interesting. They were obviously trying really hard to be accurate with like their portrayal of, like some of the things they're facing. It was that really good episode. There was an episode where Dr. Bailey was having to deal with someone who had COVID and had tested positive for COVID, but was telling her that it didn't exist.
Oh, yeah. Well, I suppose that's the thing, isn't it?
Oh my God, how do I do it? And I just thought, because I know that doctors are dealing with it now, like in real life, people come in, they have COVID, they didn't believe in it.
But they have
just
it.
Imagine frustration that,
that is worrying. So I think a lot of the Shonda Rhimes stuff she does take from case studies. I think people, from medical journals and stuff. So clearly her writers are doing their research on the ground. One thing I did pick up from Grey's is they all had the close to ET level spacesuits. Our doctors didn't have those, did they?
Yeah,
with like the breathing packs, like a tube. Maybe if anyone is actually in the medical profession, they can jump in with this. But the one Grey's Anatomy, they had almost like hazmat suits, which looked quite safe, looked quite hot, but I don't think we had those in the UK. I think they just had the little...
They have their PPE was quite full on if they worked in the ICU in the UK, I think.
Right.
Like heavy duty, like masks and shields and the full gowns, but I don't know if they were in full on hazmat suits.
Yeah, because in Grace they had like a like pure air being pumped into their faces, didn't they? I think they were a bit safer than
Grays, so that they didn't have to mask them quite so much, so that you could see their faces and they were like acting.
It could have been that. It could have been an acting thing. I don't know if anyone's watching from the US and knows the answer to that, if like the US doctors were doing that, or if it was just made for TV, then I'd love to know. Right, what are your predictions for travel for next year? So I know that before we kind of let you answer this question, we have got Florida booked for early next year, and whereas I feel like we're going on a staycation, a Disney cruise, which is all I'll talk about on my Disney channel, which is totally separate. We're going on that soon this summer, and I feel like we're going on that on those dates. However, Florida next year, I feel like I've put a deposit on that date, and it's like nothing is set in stone. I feel like we may have to move it several times, and I have to be okay with that. Is this the attitude I need to take, or am I being a bit pessimistic?
I personally think it is a good attitude to have. I would say, like, if you were wanting to go to Florida this month, I would be like,
Yeah, they just pulled things back a bit, didn't they? They just said you don't have to wear masks. Actually, you do.
Yeah, and at the moment, so the current situation, that the UK is allowing in fully vaccinated US residents without the need to quarantine. So we've said, and that's quite a strong message to send to the US. And so the ball is now very much in the US's court as to whether they want to reciprocate with the UK. And we know that those talks are ongoing. Eventually, we will see some kind of reciprocal arrangement where the US is happy for British travel. When that will happen, I don't know. A lot of travel experts had predicted it would happen already, that we would have it in time for, the big summer season. And obviously it hasn't happened yet. It's so difficult to predict exactly when it will happen. I would say next year is a pretty good bet, barring any nasty surprises.
That's what I kind of think, because
I don't like to, because this is one of my most asked questions, like, will this go on the green list at the next travel traffic light list review? And it's so hard. Like, industry experts have been trying to predict at every single traffic light list review what will go, and I don't think they've ever got it right. Not in the
statistically they should have by now.
We've got another one on Thursday, so we'll know where these might end up.
I don't feel like I'm even keeping tabs on them yet, because I feel like they'll change so many times by the time we actually go that it might hurt my head. In fact, because anything now, because it's summer, I would anticipate taking a dip before it comes out the other end. So we're due to go in January, which obviously is like a high germy time here. So whether they'll let us out of this country or into that country, I'm trying to be really chilled about, but who knows?
Scenes, because we're in this weird stage at the moment where we've got these amazing, and now we've seen it in the US where, like, line for like people getting the vaccine was going up like this, and now it's like this. So they're at 70% vaccinated for the adult population, and they're just hitting the wall of hesitancy now, and we are in the UK as well. So over the next 6 months, it will be a case of getting the vaccines out to as many people who want to have them as possible. And I think that will make a big difference for travel next year. Vaccine status will still be a thing next year, yes. I think, proving that. Obviously, there'd be exemptions. Like, we don't know at the moment what's going to happen with children and vaccines. But at the moment, you can see there are exemptions for kids that are travelling with fully vaccinated adults. So that's fine. I think next year is a lot easier because we're going to have settled down. Once we get the vaccine rollout done, and we're doing really great at it. As I said, there's a bit of a tapering off, but it's still going well. That opens the door to things being a little bit more stable than they are. And, you know, people are itching to get away, and the travel industry is really struggling.
And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right, slightly off topic now. Who were you most starstruck by? Because I know you've had some big names go, hey, Vicky Smith, saving my sanity, and they shared you in their stories or whatever. Who have you been starstruck by?
So probably the one that was most like, oh my god, I can't believe my profile was Gisha, who was in I'm last year. She like shared it and said, oh, you know, just said some really nice things. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so great. But, you know, that was lovely. It's nice when anyone shares your page and says that they really like what you do.
Definitely.
It's kind of, you know, everyone loves like good feedback. And I've like appreciated that. It's sort of what's kept me, really, like the positive comments, because sometimes, you know, it's work, and you sort of start to think, you know, oh, do I doing this or not? And then, you know, like you get a great or a nice mention, and it kind of pushes you to keep doing it, which is really
definitely
nice.
The online world's a funny place, isn't it? Especially when my like colleagues are you and Georgina and Katie, who are also in our like little blogging group. Just shout out to them. But you're the only people that really understand what we do. So if I've got like a question, there's no one other than you guys I can ask. Yeah. So no one gets like what we do is a very strange thing, really, because not many people do it and not many people understand it. And when you don't know anyone in your real life doing it, it's hard to kind of keep upbeat, isn't it? Because people are like, yay, I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. So they can't encourage you because they don't know what you're on about.
Exactly that.
It is very strange. Okay. Talk to me about the craziest DMs and theories you've been having.
I've had some really good ones.
The pandemic's brought out the Looney Tunes, wasn't it?
I think the one that really like made me go like, what? Was when someone shared it with me, that people were on TikTok like sticking magnets to after claiming that they were magnetic after having the vaccine. And I was just
Yeah.
like, whoa, that is, like that was like other level kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a bit
But
nuts.
there's been so much. I think I said earlier, I've yet to see a dodgy claim about the vaccine that hasn't been debunked, whether it be like twisting of the figures, which is like a really, really common one.
Yeah.
To like go onto a study or go onto the UK yellow card system and like grab a bunch of data and like completely take it out of context and claim, oh, this means that the vaccine rollout is dreadful and really dangerous. And it's all been really thoroughly debunked. But it's frustrating that a lot of the things that I've either fact checked on my stories or that loads of journalists have fact checked on, like way back in October last year or when, they're still coming up now.
It's frustrating.
Like, how much longer do we have to talk about this before it gets through that it's nonsense? And it's frustrating that able to be posted on social media and you get little warnings under it, but what the social media companies should really be doing is just taking it down. But they're not really acting quickly enough.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where like sometimes you have to laugh, and I did with the magnet one. I was just like, oh my god, that's just so crazy. And also like the Bill Gates microchipping one, that one as well.
Oh dear. One of my favourite memes someone shared in their stories recently was something like, this man, there's a picture of a man that I hadn't seen before. This man is responsible for like this conspiracy with COVID, and then underneath it said, this man's an actor from EastEnders, you idiots. Don't get your information. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. I was like, oh, okay, well done. Well done. Right, let's see if there are any more sensible questions in the comments. And it's not just my husband hijacking people to talk about Nando's, takeaways, and will he wear Disney t-shirts on the cruise? Lots of there are lots of just hijacking of the comments. Okay, I'm just trying to sift through to see if just struggling. Okay. Where is Vicky getting her information from? Genuine question. So where do you get your...
where do I get my information from? So I get my information from a variety of places. So media outlets. So, like every morning I'll check through the main news website. I also will look at like new studies that have come out about like vaccines or the mix, so things that are published in scientific journals and stuff like that, like the Lancet and things like that. I follow quite a few sites who specialise in public health and vaccines on Twitter, and they will often, when these studies come out, they'll do like really great threads summarising them for people who don't understand in-depth scientific chat, like often saying like, look, these are the headline results. I found the FT really good, the Financial Times, during the pandemic. Their data journalism has been amazing. I've shared like loads of their charts.
Yeah, I've seen lots of those you've posted.
The way they present data is just so good. So I really recommend. There's a journalist called John Byrne on Twitter from the FT, and he does a lot of their pandemic data stuff. And has brilliant threads with some amazing charts just presenting the data, either from studies or that's come out of the NHS or from Public Health England. So he's really, really worth a look. So yeah, those are sort of my key.
Well, I for one would like to take this opportunity to thank you for doing all that, because it sounds really, really hard work and like you just have to invest so much time and headspace into that. Especially during the pandemic, when it was at its worst and we were all really shut in, I could barely even face having the news on. My husband, I'm sure, will testify from the comments that it got to the stage that if he had the news on and it was streaming, just playing live, I just couldn't be in the room because it was just too much. So, well done for basically taking like a PhD level of commitment to your research, and thank you for that, because most of us don't have the time, the energy, the headspace, or the kind of sort of critical thinking and the skills to take all that and digest it all and make sense of it. So thank you for breaking it down for us and kind of giving it to us in a concise way that made us feel a little bit less sick about it all.
Oh, thank you.
It's been absolutely brilliant, honestly. So if you're not following Vicky already, I have put a link to her YouTube channel in the description. I've said, and let me know if you guys think that she should do this, that she does loads on stories and things, but then obviously they kind of disappear, don't they? If you would like Vicky to do some more of these lives where she, on her own channel, where she talks about issues as they come up, then, go and hassle her to do that, because I would definitely watch those. And then obviously they'd live on for a bit longer, wouldn't they? Rather than your stories disappearing and all your hard work kind of disappearing with it.
Frustrating, yeah.
It is, absolutely. So thanks so much, guys, for joining us. And thank you, Vicky, for joining us. Make sure you follow her over on Instagram. You're by Vicky Smith, aren't you? And then her YouTube channel is linked in the description, but it's also the Mummy Bubble still, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, thanks very much, guys. I will see you all very soon. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all those very YouTubey things. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Question is now, how can I turn off the live? There we go. Gone.